Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Manning. I'm a financial advisor here in Nashville, Tennessee with Pinnacle Financial Partners. And I'm so thankful that I'm joined today by Lane Rhodes, another financial advisor here at Pinnacle Financial Partners, and also LaTanya Channel. LaTanya is the director of the SBA's office here in the state of Tennessee, and she's been very gracious to give us a few minutes of her time today to walk through a couple of the new programs benefiting restaurants and venues. Um, it's been a crazy year as we've tried to navigate with our clients all the changes and programs that have come out and been available. And this latest one is benefiting restaurants and venues. And so we wanted to bring that information to you today so that you have it, you know how the programs operate, and then you can work with the SBA directly to work to acquire those funds. A couple of housekeeping items for you as we get kicked off today. If you'll use the Q&A function at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen to submit a question, we'll let you interact with Lane and LaTanya and ask them questions and be able to go over any information that you might have. We've muted everybody, so you don't have to worry about any background noise as we do go through the program today, give you the most optimal listening and watching experience. So if you use the Q&A function and not the chat function, we'll be watching for those questions to come through and do our best to address those questions. We also are recording this, and you can find this recording along with several other webinars that we've recorded out on our YouTube channel. If you go to www.youtube.com/watchpnfp, or just go to YouTube and type in the search button, Watch PNFP, you can find this webinar along with so many others that we hope you will find informational. I think that's all the housekeeping items. So Lane, I'll turn it over to you and just let you walk us through both of the programs that we're talking about today and what information that people that are watching today might need to know and how they can interact with that.
Brian, it's great to have LaTanya here. She is definitely going to be our expert this afternoon. I thought I would just briefly kind of give the highlights to start off with first, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. And so I think it is important to note this is a grant program. The funds are 100% forgivable. You don't have to pay them back as long as you use them appropriately. I think that's something that needs to be reiterated from PPP. It's the same sort of guidelines that you can use the funds on under that program as well. But it is a nice grant program that was put out and passed on December 21st of 2020. And the application opened on April 8th. It's still open right now until the funds are exhausted. So, we're not 100% sure when that'll happen. We know it has been a very, very popular program. But that combined with the Restaurant Revitalization Program that went live yesterday, we're definitely seeing a lot of interest and a lot of questions from at least our clients here at Pinnacle on both of these different programs that are available out there. And so a few things just to kind of mention and notate about the Shuttered Venue Grant Program. This program you can use to pay your payroll expenses, rent expense, utilities, putting up, barriers and kind of COVID protecting your business. You can use it to also make payments on debt that the business incurred prior to February 15th of 2020. And you can use it for kind of general maintenance and state and local fees. One of the things I like to note for this one, because I've gotten this question from a few individuals, is can we use those funds to go expand our business or open a second location? And no, that's not what this program was designed for. It was designed to kind of help you maintain and get back on your feet, having been a shuttered venue business that you currently either are not able to operate as you were before the pandemic, or at some point during the pandemic, you were told you couldn't operate. So a few of the types of businesses that qualify, and this is going to be key, is being a business that actually qualifies for this grant program, is you need to have been a live performing arts venue, a motion theater operator, museum operator, talent agent. These are some of the things that qualify under this particular program. So it is very, very targeted at specific industries. And then the restaurant revitalization is going to be more of our food service, your general operating restaurants and those sorts of things. So To me, if I'm a business owner, I think you really need to look and feel what program you fit the best in and how to maximize the dollars that you can get from one of those programs. But you can't apply and get both. So I think you really need to be cognizant of which program is going to best suit your business and which one you fall under the best in order to make sure that you qualify. For the Shuttered Venue program, you can't be a publicly traded business. And if you got 10% or more of your revenue from federal funding in 2019, you're also not eligible. So those are a few key points to kind of think about if you're looking into the Shuttered Venue program. This week, all the buzz and talk has been around the Restaurant Revitalization Program. You could go online and register on Friday as a business to make sure that you were eligible and met all the criteria of a restaurant that's eligible for this program. But I think a key thing to let business owners know is if you went online and registered on Friday, that was just registering your business. So the application for the actual fund went live yesterday on Monday. So it was kind of a two-part process if you registered on Friday. That was kind of to give SBA a heads up on how many people really had an interest in this when it went live on Monday morning. I do think that the SBA has done an absolutely phenomenal job as far as educating people on exactly how to apply for this program. They have step-by-step tutorials out there on how to go through the actual electronic application process. So we're not going to get too much in the weeds on that. LaTanya has been educating folks throughout Tennessee on how to really get your business in line and apply for this program. So I'm actually going to turn it over to LaTanya and let her talk a little bit more about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and then we will answer some questions out there from our customers.
Thank you so much, Lane. Thank you so much, Joe. I just want to thank Pinnacle for always being one of SBA's best lenders long before the pandemic. And thank you so much for stepping up on PPP. So as Lane mentioned, there have been a lot of programs that have been launched. And as was first mentioned when we first started, it has been a long year for all of you. And so the Restaurant Fund, as Lane mentioned, was launched yesterday. It's one of the latest programs that was launched to help businesses to get through the pandemic and to survive and come out on the other end ready to welcome all of us once we are vaccinated and we may not have to wear our mask again, because I know I'm ready to hit some restaurants, trust me. Top line on the Restaurant Fund as well as the Shuttered Venues Grant. Just so you know, so just to set some expectations, SBA headquarters has alerted all of us here at the local offices on the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant that we're not supposed to do any hand holding on that. We're kind of like taking a hands-off approach here in the field, just so that we're not giving any one entity one leg up that we're not giving to everybody else. So if you go to our district office site, you're not going to see a bunch of webinars and trainings on the Shuttered Venues Grant Program, but you will see some videos and recordings and information on the main SBA website, not necessarily put on by the Tennessee District. However, for the Restaurant Fund, we've been told to go ahead and get the word out and do all kinds of trainings and provide as much information as possible. But it just so happens, as Lane has mentioned, a lot of that has already been done. Last week, there were several live webinars that headquarters did, and they're currently posted on sba.gov. As she mentioned on Friday, the portal was open beforehand, before you apply, so you can get all your login taken care of and any technical glitches taken care of before you actually apply. So that all happened last week. And then yesterday on Monday at noon Eastern time, that's when businesses could actually apply for the Restaurant Fund. So Lane mentioned earlier about the Shuttered Venues Grant that there are some restrictions on whether or not you're seeking the Shuttered Venues Grant and you've already received PPP. So if you received PPP last year, top line, remember that you are eligible for Shuttered Venues Grant, but for this year, you cannot get both. If you have not already received PPP, you cannot then also get a Shuttered Venues Grant and then PPP after that. The Restaurant Fund is a little bit different. So if you have received PPP, you are eligible for the Restaurant Fund. You have to essentially deduct the amounts that you receive for PPP, and that'll determine your amount of the grant for that. We have been told by headquarters that if you're looking to do PPP and the restaurant grant, get your PPP done now quickly so you can go ahead and then apply for the restaurant grant. There's actually a handy dandy chart on the SBA.gov website. I'm going to be peeking on my other computer, pulling up some stuff off the SBA website as we go through this, and especially if I have to refer to it for some of the questions. But there's a really neat chart that's on SBA.gov. Just click on the link that says COVID-19 or coronavirus relief, and it'll show you whether you're eligible for all the programs and which ones you're excluded from and when and how, whether it's PPP, whether it's EIDL, whether it's SVOG for the shuttered venues, or whether or not the restaurant fund. So restaurant fund. So top line, there's an 800 number. So if you are a restaurant, a bar, a tavern, a saloon, a bakery, a food truck, a food cart, you are eligible for the restaurant fund. It is a grant program, meaning you do not have to pay it back. You also don't have to go through Pinnacle or any other lender. You apply directly to SBA for it. And there are 3 ways you can apply. You can call that 1-800 number. This is the 1-800 number you can also call to get your questions answered, to actually apply, or just to inquire more about the program. And that number is 1-844-279-8898. And I'll make sure we get it in the chat before we hang up, but it's 1-844-279-8898. And there are customer service reps that are available from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern time, and language support up to 10 different languages. So I said you can apply 3 different ways. So you can go online to restaurants with an S plural .sba.gov. That's the actual application portal that opened yesterday. You can do it over the phone. Now, if you do it over the phone, it's going to take a little bit longer because the operator is essentially taking your information, keying it in, and then it's going to have to mail that application to you to get your signature for you to mail it back. So it is an option, but it is going to take a little longer. Now, the third way that you can apply, and this is actually the fastest way to apply and the fastest way to get funding, is through your point of sale provider. So if you're already set up with Square and Toast as your POS provider, because they already have information on your gross receipts and your point of sale reports, that's going to be the quickest way for this restaurant fund, restaurant grant, to 1, apply, and also to get your funding. SBA already has a relationship with certain point of sale providers. Square and Toast specifically are already tapped into the application portal, into the application system, and you don't have to register on SBA's website to go through them. Now, some people have asked about the other point of sale providers like Toast, and I think the other one is like NCR and some others. They do have a way for you to apply for the restaurant fund with them, but essentially you're just essentially applying on the SBA site anyway, so it's not as fast, but that is an option for you. Okay, so you can apply 3 different ways: phone, point of sale, or directly on the SBA website. As far as how much you can get up to $5 million per location for your restaurant. And let's say you have more than 1 location, you can actually get funding for each one, but the maximum per applicant is $10 million for this particular grant program. Expenses, the list of expenses that you can use to pay with this particular grant is a longer list than PPP. So of course you can use it for payroll, you can use it for lease payments, you can use it for mortgage payments, you can use it for utilities. You can also use it for marketing expenses. You can use it for legal expenses that you may have. And another big bucket of expenses that you can use this restaurant grant fund is for construction, and specifically construction of outdoor seating. No, you can't use it to expand your existing restaurant inside, and no, you can't use it to put in a drive-through, but you can use it for construction of outdoor seating to get us all back at your place of business. Another big bucket, there's 3 major buckets for the restaurant grant expenses. There's your normal business expenses, there's construction, and then of course business debt. You can actually use it to pay off credit card expenses. You can actually use this restaurant grant to pay on your PPP loan if it turned into a loan. You can use it to pay on your EIDL loan. You can use it to pay on any business loan. You cannot use it to prepay any business debt, but you can use it for any back payments that may be owed. Same thing with any lease or mortgage payments that may be past due. You can use the restaurant fund for that. So that's huge news for that restaurant fund. So I'll stop right there because I know we got some questions, and I'll answer the rest of them questions from there and provide more information as we go along, Lane.
LaTanya, you've already been super helpful with the information that you've already provided. I think as I'm going through the questions right now, the first thing I'll do is hit the 3 ways that people can apply for the restaurant fund. That's phone, and the number is 844-279-8898. You can also go to the website at restaurants.sba.gov or contact your point of sale provider, and they can help you with that. It looks like one of the questions that we've got, LaTanya, and maybe this is just some guidance that you might offer. Ashley asked the question, she owns a coffee shop that also offers live music. And so she was questioning whether or not, I guess, would she be available for both options, and maybe which route would you direct her? Would you direct her more to the restaurant fund, or would you direct her to the grant?
So I'm not going to direct anyone any way to go because I can't do that. But here's what I will tell you. I will tell you that for the restaurant fund and SBOG, you cannot do both. So if you already have an application in for the Shuttered Venues Grant, or you've already been awarded the Shuttered Venues Grant, you cannot get the restaurant grant. So that's one thing to know. The other thing is pay close attention to the eligibility. So if you're a coffee shop, I do believe, and let me double check to make sure that's one of the automatic entities that's eligible. Yes. So here's what I mean by automatic entities. There are a host of entities that are presumed to have far more than 33% of on-site sales of food and beverages. And I'm going to read that list to make sure I get it absolutely 100% correct. So restaurants, of course, food stands, food trucks, and food carts, caterers, bars, saloons, lounges, and taverns. And then there's a category called snack and non-alcoholic beverage bars. That includes coffee shops and ice cream parlors. You do not have to submit any documentation to show your food and beverage sales if you're in any of those categories. And actually, when you look at the restaurant fund, there's 3 different ways to calculate it. You would use calculation 1, okay, as a coffee shop. Now, there are some types of business entities where they're going to have to submit documentation to show that they have 33% of gross receipts of on-site sales to the public of food and beverage. And those would be bakeries, brew pubs and tasting rooms, wineries and distilleries, and inns and taverns. But a coffee shop fits that first category where you wouldn't have to prove, hey, I'm more than 33% in food and beverage. So what I would say to Ashley is, if you have not applied for Shuttered Venues, I would take a close look at that restaurant fund to see if that applies to you.
Very helpful. Craig has a couple of questions, LaTanya, and I've seen a couple of other related questions come through. A lot of the questions are revolving around, do they qualify? Does the client qualify for one of the 2 programs? And maybe the best advice would be to go on and submit the information and go ahead and get the process going. I would assume that would then help them understand whether or not they qualify for these programs. But for Craig specifically, he said that his company is now majority owned by a publicly traded company, but was not owned by a public company before November of last year. So he was questioning whether or not he's even eligible for the Shuttered Event Program.
That's a really good question. I honestly don't know, because publicly traded companies are not currently eligible. So here's what I would recommend to Craig and others also who are trying to determine eligibility. As Lane mentioned, my agency's done a great job in putting a lot of information out on the SBA.gov website. If you go to SBA.gov/restaurants, again with the S at the end, there's an area of FAQs called Knowledge Base, and you can type in your question and an answer will pop up. Now, because the company was not publicly owned before November of 2020, I honestly don't know that answer, so I would encourage them to send an email to restaurants again, plural, at SBA.gov. And that'll get the question in the queue, and I'll send it in the queue as well. And we'll see if we can get an answer in case that comes back up my way. But he can probably get a quick answer just sending it to that email.
Very helpful. There's been a couple of questions, LaTanya, about when the business was established. Some of them were established, mid last year. So some people started their operations in the middle of last year. And then we've got one question saying that the restaurant was actually open this year. Is there any timeline for those businesses to have been open in order to qualify for these programs?
The good news about this restaurant fund, and this is so huge, if you have expenses that go back to February 15th of 2020, even if you had not opened yet, or you opened after February 15, 2020, and you're one of these eligible entities, you qualify for this grant fund. Second piece of good news, once awarded, you can use the funding to pay for expenses all the way up to March 11th of 2023. So let me give you a real example. Let's say if you had a business that was in operation, let's say you opened in 2020, restaurant, or even in 2019, and you apply for the grant. And let's say you can show that you have expenses and you were adding a second location, you were planning to add a second location, but because of the pandemic, you could not. You can use calculation 1 for that existing business that was already open and had expenses going back to February 15, 2020. And then you can use calculation 3 for that restaurant that was not yet opened, but you actually had expenses planning to open. And even though you aren't open yet, as long as you show that you're using those funds between February 15th of 2020 all the way up to March 11th of 2023, you're eligible for the grant. So let me make sure I'm clear on that. So restaurant open in business last year, might have had a temporary pause. That's calculation 1 for the restaurant grant. You have eligible expenses showing that you were preparing to open up a second location. Use calculation 2 or calculation 3. And then you add those two together, and that's your potential grant amount. So I can't remember the initial question I was answering, but the big deal is the expenses covering February 15, 2020 can be used for expenses future expenses all the way up to March 11 for 2023.
I think that's very helpful, LaTanya, because a lot of the questions were around when the business actually opened. Because we even had, as you were talking, we had a couple of people that have chimed in saying, they had scheduled to open their business, open their restaurant in the middle of last year, but then when COVID hit, they kind of had to halt construction or halt their opening process, but already had some expenses that they had incurred and were hoping to open later this year. And so I think that's very helpful information to know that anything from February of last year moving forward, they can go back and recoup. So I think that's very helpful. LaTanya, while I'm looking at these questions, do you mind to give us the email address that you referenced just a minute ago if they've got questions? What email address should they send those questions to?
Sure, it's restaurants with a S, it's plural, at SBA.gov. And I can tell you this is a secret, I can tell you for a fact. So if you didn't know, so we're a federal agency, right? So every time there's a change of administration, my bosses change, right? So I am one of 68 directors over 68 different district offices in the field. So that means that there's a political person who's over, sorry, my phone's ringing, over all of the field. I know for a fact that she's looking at that email box. My boss who's over the 68 offices, because before the program actually launched, there was a question that I had, and they asked us, they opened it up to SBA employees first, this box, restaurants, plural, at SBA.gov. And I was like, why are we doing this? This makes no sense. We can't do this. Can we fix this before it launches? Next thing I know, we had a Q&A, and my boss, who again is over 68 district offices, was asking another part of SBA, why are we doing this? This makes no sense. Can we fix this before it launches? And on the spot, it was fixed. So use that email, and a human being in very high places is taking a look at it and probably get some answers.
That is very helpful. It's always nice to have friends in the right places who can answer questions.
You have access to them even when I do. So
yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Lane.
LaTanya. Yeah, just, I just wanted to reiterate what LaTanya's saying, and just, one of the things as a bank, as a financial institution, we're always on the lookout for, and we get hit up every day, is fraud. And so you are going to have people. I even got an email last night, we will help you apply for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, send us this information. You don't have to do that. You should not contact any outside third party. The only people that can process this and help you through are going to be the SBA. So don't ever pay a third party individual to help you process the Shuttered Venue Grant or the Restaurant Revitalization Program. These programs are initiated by SBA. They have a full arsenal of individuals that are ready to help. They put that phone number that LaTanya gave you, they put that in place. They have email boxes in place. There are live people that can actually help you through the process with the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So there is absolutely no need to, interact with somebody other than that. Unless you use the Square or Toast, you can use them. They're connected with SBA. LinkedIn, but other than that, and they shouldn't charge you. They're not charging you anything to apply for this either. So if somebody's contacting you wanting you to pay them a fee to help process your application, you need to walk away as quickly as possible. That is not a valid request. That is a fraud attempt on your business. And another thing that, we saw a lot during PPP, with PPP, you could have an authorized person at the company kind of fill out the application and sign for you. With Restaurant Revitalization Fund, it has to be a signer in the business that walks through the electronic application, because when you get to the end, you're going to have to fill out a 4506T form that's a tax transcript request for the business, and only an authorized signer that's typically an owner of the company can sign for that. So if you have a CPA that normally helps you prepare this type of stuff, just know they're going to get to a point in the application where they can't submit it, because you, as the business owner, have to be the one that signs some of the attestations and sign the 4506T at the end of the process. So I think those are two important things to remember as you're getting all your materials ready to sit down and apply for the Restaurant Revitalization Program.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for mentioning that, Lane. And another thing that I've shared a lot on many of the webinars and trainings that we've done, remember, you're the one that's going to be liable. If you used a third party who told you do this, do that, they're gone. When the feds come down and decide to prosecute, they're coming after you. And sadly, that's happening a lot, where someone paid somebody to do their PPP, and they just came out of nowhere and said, hey, we'll help you get approved for your PPP. And they did it. At the end of the day, the eligible expenses for PPP are not to pay. We're not to pay that person. So that money came out of their pocket. It's not an eligible PPP expense. It's not an eligible SVOG expense. It's not an eligible restaurant grant expense. So many times people have paid a consultant their pocket, and then when it's time for the prosecution, you just paid somebody to put you in jail. I hate to put it that way, but
that's a great point.
As we're loading some more questions in here, I know I've seen a couple of questions. People kind of jumped in just a little bit late. We are recording this section. It will be available likely later today, for sure tomorrow on our YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/watchpnfp, this is available. And as LaTanya has mentioned, she's recorded several webinars as well that are available on the SBA's website, and it's super helpful. Pinnacle has also dedicated a website to this information. If you want to navigate there through our website, it's pnfp.com/SBA relief. It's a great reminder. We don't help you process these, but we are providing you some of the information, and we're thankful that LaTanya has been so good to spend time with us and answer your questions and kind of walk us through both of the programs. But all we have is information. We can't help you process those. We can't take your applications. We can't do any of that, but we can at least provide that information. So some of the info we go over today is there, and as we learn more, we'll be sure to update pnfp.com/SBA relief. LaTanya, it looks like Keith has a question. he says that he's asking if funds could potentially be used for painting or floor replacements, equipment upgrades that were planned for last year. Now there's some structural issues with their facility. So, I guess Keith's question is, could the funds from the grant be used for things inside of his business that he had planned for last year?
Yes, if those are normal business expenses and maintenance costs needed for the business, absolutely yes.
Awesome.
Brian, that goes for too, if they get the funds and, like LaTanya said, they have until, March of 2023 to use them. If they have something break in the business between now and then, they can use the funds to help cover those expenses as well. So if a piece of equipment goes down or they have a leak and need to repair something, they're able to use those funds for that type of expense as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, LaTanya, I see a lot of questions that are coming in. Jack's asked it, and I think we've seen it a couple of different places, wanting to know, I guess, or get some specific help about their business and how to calculate their loan amount. That's probably best that they go to the website, use the calculators and the forms on your website to understand their actual loan or grant information. Is that your best guidance?
Absolutely. And there's three basic ways that have already been published on how to calculate. So and they're real simple, easy calculations. So definitely go to the SBA.gov. I was going to try to pull up the easiest one if I can on my other computer, but definitely go to SBA.gov to pull up on how to calculate the potential grant amount for the business. I will mention that the top line number that you're going to use to start out with will be gross receipts, and you don't have to include any PPP funding that you received. You don't have to include any EIDL funding that you receive. You don't have to use any state or local grants. For instance, like Davidson County provided grants to a lot of businesses through the CARES Act. You don't have to use that. You can take those out of your gross receipts. In effect, that means your restaurant grant will be much higher. So you're not getting penalized for getting a grant or a PPP or an EIDL before. But all of that is definitely on the SBA website. And remember, just look at the different calculations. It tells you which one to use based on your business situation. And it's real easy to calculate what the potential grant amount is.
When you get into the electronic application as well, if that's the form that you use, which I think is the easiest, and like LaTanya said, that's going to be the one that gets you processed the fastest. When you select what type of business you are, whether you're a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC, it's going to then automatically close out the fields that don't apply to you and push you through to do the calculation that applies to your business. So it's just plug and play at this point. You plug in your numbers from your documents and it's going to do the calculations for you. I think it is important to know, that once you get through the application and it tells you the amount that you qualify for, it still goes to an actual person that's going to review your application and confirm that all of that information is accurate. So there is a possibility that that number could potentially change from when you submitted it and what you got in your application to what you actually receive as the grant.
Mm-hmm.
And LaTanya, I've seen a couple of questions come in. Oh,
thanks for mentioning that, Lane. Also, if you want to see what the electronic portal is going to ask you, you can actually go to sba.gov/restaurants, and you can actually see the application and all the different fields are going to pop up electronically if you want to see that. And there's also screenshots of the application portal itself.
And if you mess up, which happens, you can actually call a person and get them to help you fix it. So it's not the end of the world if you've already gone through this and you realize you made a mistake. You can actually call SBA. Now, it is important to note that once they do that and reset your application to allow you to go back and fix it, that drops you down in the queue to wherever you are on the day that you go and fix it. So you don't get to hold your place if you do go back and change any errors that are in the application. And LaTanya, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe right now for the first, I can't remember how many days, 20 days, but we're
21 days until May 24th.
Okay, so if you can let us know what business owners qualify for that, they're prioritizing those applications.
Sure. For the first 21 days, and this was established by Congress and signed by the president, businesses that are owned by women, veterans, and disadvantaged applicants, what we typically call minority, are going to get priority access. And that's the first 21 days. And priority access means priority review and priority funding. And then in addition to that, the smallest of the small businesses, there's certain dollar amounts that have been set aside of the total amount for the smallest businesses, businesses that have 50,000 in receipts or less, businesses between 50,000 and I think it's 150,000, and then between 150,000 and 1.5 million. So in addition to the priority access for women, veterans, and disadvantaged, there's also a set of funding that's been set aside for the truly small businesses. And that first 21 days ends on May the 24th. But that does not mean you should not apply now. Still apply and get in line.
Yeah, get in that queue. So we totally anticipate this funding being exhausted and not hitting all the people that actually want to apply for it. But that's what gives us ammunition to go back to Congress and say, look at all the people we weren't able to fund. The demand and need is still there for it, so that hopefully, they can look at that for future funding purposes.
Yep.
LaTanya, is there any requirement to demonstrate a revenue decline from 19 to 20 in order to qualify for the RRF? I know we've kind of been used to that in the PPP world of having to demonstrate revenue losses from quarter to quarter and all of that. But with the RRF, is there any sort of stipulation or guideline for a revenue reduction?
So there's no stipulation for revenue reduction, but think of it this way. So once you know that you're an eligible business type that qualifies, whether or not you're a restaurant or versus a hotel or a tavern, and you know that, the next thing you need to look at is the calculation. So when you look at that calculation, it's going to tell you how to calculate your potential grant amount. And it's basically take this number, deduct that number, and there's a total. And if it's above 1,000 and below 5 million per location, then you qualify and you're eligible. So essentially what's happening, for instance, calculation 1 is simply, and I want to read it because I don't want to get it wrong. Calculation 1 applies to all those operations that were in business before or on January of 2019, right? And basically the calculation of the potential award is your 2019 gross receipts minus your 2020 gross receipts minus any PPP loan amounts. And if that dollar amount is above $1,000, you qualify. So that's how it's capturing, any issues with your revenue. And that's calculation 1. There's 2 other calculations as well.
And so the best guideline really is for people to go to the website and take their information and use those calculators to really understand, 1, their eligibility, but then 2, what their potential eligible grant amount would be. I think that's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Blaine and LaTanya, it doesn't appear that we have any more questions that are coming in. I'll let you all sort of offer your closing thoughts and ideas as we kick these 2 programs off, and then we'll wrap it up for today.
I think I'm looking at some of my notes here from all the trainings that we've had internally at SBA, and I've listened to some of the public ones. I think one of the things to keep in mind is, as Lane mentioned, SBA headquarters is implementing a lot of lessons learned from last year, where last year it was hard for some of the smaller businesses to get access to PPP. We have reports that it was very hard for some women and minorities to get access to PPP, and they're trying to fix all that with 1, making the process simpler and smoother and easy to understand, 2, getting the information out well ahead of time of the application portal, and 3, Congress, of course, set aside priority applicants and review. But the other thing to keep in mind when you look at those calculations, I mentioned there's calculation 1, there's calculation 2, and calculation 3. Calculation 1 is for businesses that were in operation on or before January 1, 2019. Calculation 3 is one of those calculations where you had, you just have expenses and you may not necessarily have opened, or you had to close, or you haven't opened your second location. Calculation 3 is the only one that's going to require supporting documentation up front to be submitted. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have them handy. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have them available, because you may be asked for them. And always know that when in a government program, you may be audited down the line. So, but calculation 3 is the only one where you have to show expenses that were expended, and you're using that to determine the grant award. or those instances where the entity has to prove that they've had 33% or more gross receipts in on-site of sales to the public. Those entities do have to submit documentations up front. But calculation 1 and calculation 2 are fairly easy to do. Please don't shut yourself out of this. You know, we know there's some exhaustion with attempting to get access to SBA programs over the last year. We know some people are like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of dealing with SBA. I call that 800 number for idle and I can't get through. We know it's gotten a little better there, but please know a lot of lessons learned have been implemented on the Restaurant Fund, and we really want you to take advantage of this. It's a grant program to, again, to help cover those back expenses, to help cover current expenses and future expenses all the way to 2023. So y'all can see my face again at your restaurants. So please take advantage of it.
Lane, anything else you would offer before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just thank LaTanya for being here with our Pinnacle clients this afternoon. You know, both of these programs are great programs, the Shuttered Venue and the Restaurant Revitalization, but it is important to know that, you know, you cannot receive both. So you need to evaluate both of them and determine which one you're best qualified for. And then, you know, there still, I think as of today, there are some PPP round 2 funds still available out there, but I am hearing those are going fast and those could be exhausted by this week. So if you have not applied and you were still considering doing PPP, you need to get your application. And that's even if you haven't applied for any PPP, haven't gotten around one. We do expect those funds to be exhausted by the end of this week. So that is still something that's an option, but you know, there's also the SBA 7A loan program is still available out there. So we have tons of options that are available to business owners that need access to capital right now that are trying to get back up and operational. So always reach out to your Pinnacle banker to see what resources are available to you.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for your time. As we walked through the last year, our job has been to try to understand the information and pass it along to our clients to advocate on their behalf and help them walk through all these opportunities that they have to get the help that they need. So we're thankful that you all gave us the time and your information. We would direct all of you to the SBA websites that LaTanya referenced. We've also sort of tried to take that information and put it on our websites, pnfp.com/SBA relief. All the information we covered today is there, and as we learn more, we'll link to the websites that has all the information for the SBA as well. And this program will be available on our YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/watchpnfp, you can see this and many others. So we're thankful that you spent some time with us today. Lane and LaTanya, thanks for your time, and we look forward to being again with you soon.